Hi folks, and welcome to the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print. Now as you can see, we're still in the process of moving, so again, sorry about the crummy background here, but as we go through this thing that we like to call life, wanted to go and continue on in our chronology here of the Star Wars Expanded Universe in publication order. And so today we get to a brand new outlet for Star Wars. We're done, or at least taking a break from the Marvel comics, and we're going to look at a new thing. This is a new outlet that Star Wars enters into, which is the Star Wars newspaper strips. Now this, in our chronology, we're in the year March of 1979. So again, like I said, this is a very different outlet for Star Wars. We've had two novels at this point. We've had the A New Hope novelization. We've had Splinter of the Mind's Eye. Of course, Episode 4, the film. But then we've had the Marvel comics that we've been going through. But this is a brand new thing, which is the Star Wars newspaper strips. Now, again, very different outlet. The L.A. Times actually got the rights to make Star Wars newspaper strips in the comics section that you would see, like Garfield or Family Circus or Peanuts or all that kind of thing, and would have the rights to print those. Now, this was, of course, syndicated throughout the United States, and it was kind of broken up into quite a few different stories. But essentially what it was, or what it looked like, was each day you would have just a couple panels, maybe two, pushing it would be 3 or 4, but then that's it. And then eventually, once it all wrapped up, then you would have the complete story. So there was only like a few panels. I believe there's some prints out there that show some only 1 panels. So it's very, very limited on all that's included in it. So there were several different things. This ran from 1979 to 1984. And it didn't actually begin with Archie Goodwin. A lot of people say that this is what Archie Goodwin is famous for, but it actually was an author named Russ Manning, who actually was the original writer for this series. Now, unfortunately, Mr. Manning passed away because of cancer, and so that was the whole reason of why Archie Goodwin actually ended up taking over for the guy, because unfortunately he had passed, or Russ Manning had passed away. So, so we're not at the Archie Goodwin stories yet. This is still Russ Manning, of course. So basically how this would work, in their initial start, there were 2 different stories. The first one was published Monday through Saturday, and that was called, and it was in black and white, and it was called Gambler's World. Then on Sundays, in the color comics, would be a story called the Costanza Affair. Now, so again, it would pretty much be, the Costanza Affair would be a weekly comic, and then the rest you would get in every paper. So you had to be buying all the newspapers to get the whole story. So you might be thinking, how in the world am I supposed to read this? Did anyone keep their newspapers? Well, thankfully, Dark Horse in the 90s came and actually got a hold of all the web strips, or the comic strips, I should say, web strips. But anyways, they got a hold of all those and kind of reorged them, cleaned them up, organized them, kind of put them in the correct order on the page, gave the ones that didn't have color, and actually put them out as classic Star Wars. In this case, the early adventures. So this is one of the trade paperbacks. This is the one that has the 2 stories we're talking about here in them, in here. And so this is the perfect way to do this. Another way you can get this is, of course, checking out the awesome Epic collections that Marvel has been putting out. They've been putting out the newspaper strips one. So they've cleaned this up, and as you can see here, turning into a random page, they've added color, and it looks, I think it looks pretty good, honestly, to me. So the story. What is the story? So chronologically speaking, we're going to start with Gambler's World. So Gambler's World starts where Luke and Leia are basically going, and they're trying to find support for the Rebel Alliance. Typical Luke and Leia adventures, right? So they're going, and they're doing their thing, and they end up going to the Gambler's World. It's actually a casino-like planet. There's tons of different casinos that they go to, and it's on this planet called Varset 5. And basically, it's very similar to the wheel that we kind of talked about a little bit earlier in our chronology with the Marvel books. Except this time, how the wheel got to keep a lot of the income from the casinos. This pretty much goes all to the Empire, so they don't get to keep it. It's all sent to the Empire. So Luke and Leia are going there. They're trying to make connections. They're trying to, meet people and get some allies. Some who have sympathy for the rebellion. And essentially, what happens is Luke and Leia get captured by this villain called Black Hole. Now, he's probably one of the most, if not the most famous character or villain from this series. And what's really cool about him is he's actually one of the Emperor's hands, which is what Mara Jade is, who we'll get to much later in our chronology here. And even in chronological order, no, he might actually be, Mara Jade's later. That's an allegiance. Anyways, so Luke and Leia get captured. Black Hole's like, hey, these are pretty key rebels. So he reaches out to Darth Vader to let Vader know that they're here. And eventually the droids save Luke and Leia, but then, of course, hilarity ensues. I don't really want to spoil the whole thing. So that's the Gambler's World. And so we'll summarize this all at the end. So then the next part of our chronology here is the next story, which is called the Costanza Affair. Now, essentially, the Costanza Affair is story time with 3PO, or just story time in general. The story seems to be structured as 3PO tells a story, then Luke tells a story, and then 3PO tells another story. I mean, it's pretty much just a lot of it is storytelling, or story time, if that's what you want to call it. So it's kind of how it's structured. So essentially what happens is it starts out, the droids ended up, R2-D2 and C-3PO got in some of this crazy stuff, and they're rescued by Han and Chewbacca. And basically then C-3PO goes and says, oh, here's how we got into this. And so then he tells Han that Luke and this passenger that he brings with him called Gammon, they were going to the planet called Costanza. So they, kind of learn how that all ended up. Han, Chewie, and the droids go to Costanza. They meet up with Luke and Gammon, who then tell them their story. And so then Han agrees after the story to help Luke and Gammon in this cause with the rebellion, because it's a great way to help the rebellion. It's a great way to, again, it's going to be a massive blow to the Empire, or a blow to them. And so then they go on and do that. And then it ends with 3PO being like, oh, hey, let me tell you another story, like I said. So that's pretty much the Costanza Affair. Again, trying to be as spoiler-free as I can, because I do think these are pretty good. So the last thing I want to talk about before we kind of wrap this all up is a children's book. This is kind of one of those obscure EU things that I don't think a lot of people know, but it's a children's book by Random House called The Maverick Moon. And so this came out in March of 1979. So around this time is when this came out. And it's actually written by Eleanor Erdhart. Sorry, I had to check my notes there. But Eleanor Erdhart is actually not, her name is not on either side. The other side is essentially the same as this, just flipped. Actually, yeah, no, it's the same thing. Except it tells you the price down here. $1.25. That's pretty cool. And then, actually, even when you open it up, it doesn't have the author's name in here. It's kind of interesting. Again, a little bit different. But they do have the illustrator. It's illustrated by Walter Wright. As you can see here, he gets a name drop there. But the writer, Eleanor, does not seem to get anything. Even at the end of the book, it's really weird that the author didn't get a credit. So kind of strange. But anyways, the story of this is Luke Skywalker is at this new academy for space pilots, and essentially he is doing different missions there. He teams up with Princess Leia to do another mission, which involves flying an X-Wing, and of course it all ends well, and yeah. Don't want to say too much more. I probably just gave it away right there. But anyways, very, very short story. Again, it's a children's book. This will probably take you 15 to 20 minutes, if at most. I mean, I don't think even anything over 20, unless you're reading very, very slowly. But even just flipping through here, honestly, I mean, the illustrations are really, I think they're pretty good, honestly. Just kind of, checking out some illustrations here. They actually look pretty good for a book written in a children's book at that, let alone, 1979. Where's another good one? Like here, I mean, even like the detail on Mark Hamill and the droids, it's actually pretty good, if you ask me. So, yeah, the Maverick Moon. Very, very short. Honestly, pretty cheap, I think, to find. So, to wrap all this up, what do I think about these stories? Well, let's look at the Maverick Moon. Maverick Moon, is this essential? Oh, absolutely not. It is not essential at all. This is a little kiddie book that I found out back, I think it was in 2016 is when I got this. This is one of those obscure expanded universe things that I didn't even know existed or knew existed until much, much later. So this was something that came a little bit later for me. I would only say get this if you're a completist, because there really is not much here. It's just a one-off little story, and nothing significant happens in here. I would, like I said, only get this if you are a completist like me, and if you are someone who wants to pick this up or would even be interested in getting this, honestly, I paid under $5 for this. I know that for a fact. I think shipping cost more to get this book than the actual book. So honestly, you might even be able to find one with that nice $1.25 price tag on it. This really isn't much. As for the webcomics, Gambler's World and Costanza Affair, are these essential? No. No, they're not. Not all of them are, and these really are not. There's some significant things that might happen a little bit later that we'll get to. But as for these, honestly, no, I wouldn't say they're essential. But should you check them out? Should you read them? Honestly, I think you should. I think these are worth checking out. I think these are great reads. I really do enjoy them. And I think that Dark Horse did a great job of kind of fixing it and doing, their edits, a few, very, very few edits. And they make them a lot more enjoyable to read. They're definitely a product of its time. It's very 70s-esque, and it still kind of is drawn similar in the ways to the Marvel books. But I think it's drawn, honestly, I think these are drawn a little bit better. I really do. I think that these are, people who, does a great job. And in fact, Russ Manning actually does the art in this book. So I think he does fantastic in here. Now, of course, there's some really good art later, but I think Russ Manning, for writing and drawing this is actually pretty good. So, yeah, I mean, I would say go check it out. And again, check out the Marvel reprints if you'd like. I think those are probably the best way to get them now, or the most accessible way to get them. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I think these are definitely worth your time. I think they're interesting, and I think you might get enjoyment out of them. So, but again, that's just me. So, anyways, thank you so much for watching and checking this out. That's all the time we have here, but I will see you next time with another video.